The Testament of Anne Lee just opened in Canadian theaters.
For those new here who are unaccustomed to a woman preacher, come nearer to me.
This is a movie musical that stars Amanda Seyfried as the woman who founded a religious sect called the Shakers in the 18th century. And I gotta say, it is one of the best and most daring films that I got to see over the last year. But people just aren't talking about this. So Alissa Wilkinson reviewed The Testament of Anne Lee for the New York Times. She's here with her take on the movie and why this movie is flying under the radar. Hi, Alissa.
Hello.
I'm so glad to have you here. And let's just dive right in. Like, why do you love The Testament of Anne Lee?
Well, I have a little bit of a personal connection to the Shakers because I grew up near where Anne Lee and her first group of Shakers landed in the U.S. I grew up right around the corner. But so I was already kind of in the bag. But the movie itself is so singular. I think, as you were saying, I've just never seen a movie like this ever. It's kind of a musical, but it's kind of unlike any musical I've ever seen. Everything about it is just different than a movie that you would expect from the description of it, I think. And it's telling a story that is one that I think most people don't know either. So I went to see it with some expectations and it blew me out of the water.
Well, you're saying it's kind of a musical, right? But not a conventional musical here. Like, this is not Amanda Seyfried reliving her Mamma Mia glory days. So,
No.
Let's actually listen to a little bit, like a scene from the movie where we can get a taste of the kind of music you can expect from The Testament of Anne Lee. Okay, so that's a scene from The Testament of Anne Lee. Alissa, like, if anyone out there is like groaning at the idea of a movie musical, like if they're just like, oh my God, musicals like that is just not for me, like how would you respond to them?
So usually when we think of a movie musical, it's like everyone kind of stops and like does a musical number. And this is totally not like that. So the composer worked with Shaker music, which is kind of derived out of English folk music. And it's very traditional and regimented and almost like, I don't know, it's very different from what you would expect, and kind of developed it into these musical numbers that are taking the internal experience of the characters and kind of externalizing it. And so it's sort of integrated into the story in a way that's completely different. This movie is strangely hard to talk about because it's so different from anything that you've ever seen. But I think that, the music itself is almost like haunting in a way that you don't often see in a movie musical. It's about as far from Mamma Mia as you could possibly get, while also being incredibly beautiful, incredibly kind of almost as if you are stuck in the mind space of the characters and you're kind of hearing what's going on inside their brains. And that, I think, is just really extraordinary. It's an extraordinary film that movie musical as a descriptor, just like pretty much any other descriptor, doesn't really cover what it actually is.
Yeah, look, you said that the musical numbers are integrated into the plot. Like, that's actually, can you give us like a summation of the plot here, right? Like
Sure.
Who is Mother Anne?
Yes, so this is kind of a cradle to grave biographical movie about Anne Lee. She was the founder of, as you said, of this sect, which is the Shakers, which was sort of a derogatory term at first that was placed on this group, the Shaking Quakers. They're a kind of a Christian sect that believed in being fully bodily integrated in their worship. And so they would dance and they would physically shake. And so it is the story from when she was a tiny baby till she died, of how she came to her conclusions about things like God and how the proper life should be lived, how she took her people from England to the US right around the time of the Revolutionary War. And she had very radical ideas about things like justice, gender equality, slavery. She believed in abolition, all of these things. She was way ahead of her time. And she created these communities. She believed in celibacy. That was a big part of her beliefs. And at the height of the Shaker movement, there were many thousands of adherents. Today, there are only, I believe, two left. But there are two left. And so she kind of created this movement where people lived in this harmonious community, as kind of a utopian community. And that's the story that you're hearing. But we're given her story as if we want to join her sect. And so it's almost as if we are being told it as potential joiners.
I love that.
Of the group, not as if we're being skeptical of these visions that she's having.
Yeah, and I think as you were sort of suggesting earlier, like the musical numbers are a key way into that, right? Like we get swept up in the religious fervor, and that is actually what I really love about this movie, because in some ways I was comparing this movie to Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master, so The Master, I think one of our favorite movies the last 25 years, and both The Master and Testament of An Lee, they have a certain critical distance when you're looking at these religions and these the formations of these religions, but they also recognize the value in these belief systems and how these belief systems can be a response to trauma and how can they can be healing. Is that what was it? Did you find that comparison in the movie?
I think that's true, yeah. But The Master is interesting, right? Because it is also showing that there's a sort of an abusiveness, I think I would say, to the way that the leader of that sect is treating his adherents. And this movie really is about a feminine leader who believes in caring for her flock, I guess. And she's really reaching out to people who are scared of the world that they find themselves living in. There's a whole sequence where there's an eclipse and there's a group of people who are kind of huddled in fear of what's happening in the world at this moment. It's a time of revolutions. It's a time of really a lot of fear and upheaval. And she's reaching out and saying, come to my community, where we have this way of life that we can be safe and we can care for one another and we can be radically equal to one another. So it's totally different from the kind of movie that you often see about a religious sect or a cult. And one thing that I walked out of my first screening of the film and thought any other filmmaker, I think, would have made a horror film out of this. And it's not a horror film. It's sort of almost exactly the opposite. It's a film about religious ecstasy instead of religious horror, which I think is often what we see today.
Yeah, I mean, you could just mention, I know in your review you mentioned the movie The Witch. I was thinking of a movie like Saint Maud, movies where a woman has this conviction and beliefs is scary, in their horror story. And kind of following up on this, look, despite how much we love this movie, despite all the things that are going on, there's just not a lot of buzz. It's barely cracking into awards season. I'm almost worried that Amanda Seyfried, for this astonishing performance, might not get her Oscar nomination on Thursday. So I have an idea of why that might be, but I'd love to hear what you're thinking in terms of what's behind that.
Well, one of the astonishing things about how little attention it's getting is that the director of this film and co-writer, Mona Fassvold, she co-wrote it with her partner, Brady Corbet, who was the director of The Brutalist last year, and Mona Fassvold co-wrote that film with him. So that film, of course, got tons of awards attention. And this one seemingly is flying under the radar, and it feels to me one of the reasons is, you hate to say it, but often men don't go see movies about women because they feel oh, this isn't a movie for me for whatever reason. And so you don't want to ascribe a movie, the response to a movie to that, but sometimes it seems like that's the only real response. But it also is just a strange film, right? And so sometimes people just maybe they don't know what to make of it, and so they're not willing to kind of take the risk. And I think that this movie is very much worth taking the risk on. In my review, one thing that I said was, whether or not it's to your taste is kind of almost beside the point, because I think it's such an overwhelming experience in a movie theater that it's really worth just experiencing, and having seen it, I think, is worth it. Whether or not you walk out and go, I love that, or, oh, I don't even know if that was for me. I think that you'll be happy that you did experience it.
Totally agree. And listen, like the contrast between how The Brutalist was received and how this was received is brutal, really. And really, Testament of Anne Lee is the better movie, in my opinion. So Alissa Wilkinson, thank you so much for talking to me about this.
Of course. Thank you.
Alissa Wilkinson is a movie critic with the New York Times. The Testament of Anne Lee is currently playing in limited release. I'm Radheyan Simonpillai, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion.